Have you ever stared up at a moonless sky with the feeling that the void was staring back at you? Not just staring, studying you, the way a biologist studies a microbe under a lens. I have. And if you think that's just a pretty metaphor for an existential crisis, listen to me until the end. Because the silence I'm about to tell you about still rings in my ears like a brass bell. My name is Jay Armstrong, and if you found this video, it means my mailbox is already overflowing with past due internet bills, and I myself am most likely somewhere without cell towers. I work as an acoustic engineer. Or rather, I worked. My specialty is locating sources of anomalous noise at industrial sites. Boring work for a lover of silence. The irony is, I hate loud sounds. A paradox, right? It all started 3 years ago when Daryl Coleman walked into my office, steeped in the smell of dust and ozone. Daryl was a shift supervisor at the old Meridian Steel plant about an hour outside Pittsburgh. The plant had long been shut down, gutted, and now some investment fund was trying to turn it into lofts for hipsters. But there was a problem. Daryl sat down across from me, placed a dictaphone on the desk, and said one sentence that turned my life upside down. "We've got something screaming in there at night, but it's not human, and it doesn't record." I smiled. Usually, crooked security guards try to jack up their hazard pay that way. But Daryl pulled out his wallet and laid $5,000 on the table. Cash. Up front. He said that out of 6 night watchmen, 5 had quit before working a full week because they were afraid to set foot on the 3rd floor. "Describe the sound," I asked, putting the money into my drawer. Daryl rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked exhausted. I've seen men like him in war, men who've been on high alert too long but never actually saw the enemy. "It's a hum," he said. Low, right on the edge of infrasound. Your eardrum starts itching from the inside. And then, then the hum shuts off. A total silence falls, the kind that makes your teeth ache. And in that silence, a scream comes. And you know the scariest part? You can't tell if you're hearing it with your ears or straight with your brain. Like someone is screaming directly into your hippocampus. I packed up my gear. I was an arrogant fool, armed with parabolic microphones and a spectrum analyzer. In my worldview, there was no such thing as a sound that couldn't be digitized. The first night at the Meridian plant shattered that worldview into pieces. I chose a room on the 3rd floor that the guards called the Tin Can. It was a completely empty shop floor with bare concrete walls and broken windows boarded up with plywood. The perfect place to record reverb. I set up 4 high-sensitivity microphones around the perimeter and sat down in the center, putting on my headphones. The first hour was quiet. Just mice scratching in the ventilation and old structures creaking as they cooled down after a hot day. And then I felt it. You don't hear infrasound with your ears. You feel it with your body. It started as pressure in my sinuses, like I was plunging into an ocean trench. My eyeballs began to vibrate. I glanced at the vibration sensor. The needle didn't even twitch. According to the device, there was silence all around, but my ribcage was shaking from a resonance at roughly 19 hertz, the frequency of fear, scientists call it, the frequency at which a ghost's eyes operate. And then came the silence. You don't know what silence is until you come face to face with it. It was like having my hearing chopped off with an axe. The active noise canceling in my headphones kicked in, but it was fighting against the air itself. I felt like I had gone deaf. I opened my mouth to say a reflexive, "Oh shit," but my voice drowned in the vacuum. I couldn't hear my own heartbeat. I couldn't hear the blood rushing through my veins. Sound was absent as a physical phenomenon. And that's when I heard the scream. It passed through me like an X-ray. It was a woman's voice, piercing, filled with such raw animal agony that my arms broke out in goosebumps the size of peas. I ripped off my headphones, thinking it was a hallucination from sensory deprivation, but it only got louder. The scream came from every corner of the room, and yet it was inside me at the same time. The sound had texture, as if someone's vocal cords were being shredded, scraping against broken glass. I was rolling on the concrete floor, pressing my hands over my ears. It must have lasted about 30 seconds. When it stopped and the normal soundscape returned, I was lying in a fetal position, shaking like a wet dog. I grabbed the tablet with the recorder. All 4 recording tracks were empty. The waveform was a perfectly flat line, absolute 0. I should have left. But I stayed because I'm a coward, afraid of looking like a coward, and because the money was good. I told myself it was the infrasound causing hallucinations, that the old factory was breathing like a giant wooden flute. On the second night, I brought a Tesla-Patterson device. It's a piece of equipment that visualizes the acoustic field. In simple terms, you can see how sound travels. I sat in the same room. The hum started exactly at 2:17 a.m. The pressure was building, but I was ready for it. I cranked up the counterwave noise suppressors and stared at the visualizer monitor, and I saw it. In the corner of the room, just below the high ceiling, the sound was refracting. The air there rippled differently. The outlines were blurred, but it was a figure, a human figure, hanging in the air. I boosted the device's sensitivity. On the monitor, ripples were forming, a map of sound density. The hanging object didn't reflect light, but it reflected sound. It was a woman. She was hanging in a noose made of, I don't know what, made of silence itself, and her mouth was open in a soundless scream. I understood this by looking at the cold sensor readings. It wasn't just a ghost, it was an acoustic trap. Something so emotionally charged, so incredibly loud and tragic had happened in this room once that the bricks had absorbed the energy of that scream. "Get out," I whispered to myself. But then, the figure on my monitor twitched. A spike of acoustic pressure surged in my direction. I lifted my eyes from the screen. I saw nothing, but I smelled something. It smelled of burning and cheap lily-of-the-valley perfume. The smell was moving. It circled around me and stopped right behind my right shoulder. And then, right next to my ear, a whisper came. Quiet, wet, and absolutely clear. Each word stabbed into my brain like an ice needle. The voice said, "Quiet. They'll hear." I ran out of the building, leaving my equipment behind. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I tried to write it off as psychosis, but damn it, where did that smell come from? On the 4th day, I dug into the factory archives. The truth turned out to be more terrifying than any legend. In 1987, there was an accident at the plant. Part of the supporting structure on the 3rd floor collapsed. A night janitor named Laura Graves was killed. They didn't find her right away. Many people had heard her screams, but they mistook them for the screech of an old machine. And do you know why everyone assumed it was a machine? Because that same night, the worst thunderstorm in a decade hit. The thunder was so loud that Laura's cries were practically inaudible. She died completely alone amid the roar of the elements, and nobody stopped to listen. What I recorded that night on the visualizer couldn't be played back through speakers. It was a resonance map. The only way to get rid of the ghost was not just to record it, but to play the recording back at the same volume in that same room, to let her scream out. I realized that they, the ones the voice had warned about, were not people. They were some kind of entities, predators of silence, that had flocked to her death agony like vultures. Laura was protecting me from them with her scream on that first night. Her infrasound blast was a warning for me to get the hell out. The file is 3 terabytes. It is the loudest silence in the world. I'm heading to the factory as soon as I hit the upload button on this video. I'm going to take my 10,000-watt speakers and play this symphony for the predators of silence. If you never see me on this channel again, don't come looking for me. And most importantly, never, do you hear me? Never try to record the absolute silence that falls in the middle of the night, especially if no one can hear you at that moment, because someone or something might think you're trying to talk to it. And now, keep quiet. It's already here.